Jemaah Islamiyah, the armed group behind some of Southeast Asia's deadliest terror attacks, including the 2002 Bali bombing, says it has disbanded. All right, let's dive deeper into JI's surprise announcement with Munira Mustaffa, Executive Director of the Chasseur Group. She joins us from Kuala Lumpur this morning. So, Munira, does this come as a surprise to you? And what sort of factors do you think led to the group's dissolution now?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. So it didn't really come to me as a surprise, to be honest, because JI has reached to a point where they've become very, very weak right now. And the dissolution can be perceived as to be in line with JI's general interest to prioritize Dakwah and operating above ground and to be perceived as legitimate political actors.
Well, Nira, JI's leaders may have dissolved the group, but I guess the question is it clear that they've renounced all violence and perhaps more importantly also called on their followers to abandon the cause?
Yes, that seems to be what they're signaling, but we have to remember that there might be some elements within the factions that might not agree with what the leadership is saying. So I wouldn't discount the possibility of an offshoot or a splinter group forming after this.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The group has a history of splinters. What potential threats could they pose in the absence of the centralized leadership, and how prepared should the authorities be to address these threats?
So the dissolution of JI, it can be considered either, it doesn't matter whether it's genuine or a strategic maneuver, it will have significant implications. There is sorry, are you getting me?
Yep. Yeah, we can hear you, yes.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so
yeah, just how prepared should the authorities be to address these threats?
So the dissolution can be perceived, can be read as a victory for the for Indonesia's counterterrorism, which could potentially shape future policies and bolster public support for such measures. But I would stress that the government cannot afford to become complacent, because JI has a well-documented history of executing major terrorist attacks in the past, and we cannot discount that there could be a resurgence or restructuring that could pose renewed threats. So this could be seen as a rebranded JI. It still might attract new resources or recruits from the younger generation. So we should consider the differential between the older cohort and the younger cohort. And if that is to happen, if JI is covertly regrouping or rebranding or attempting to even infiltrate the political spheres to adapt to the stringent security environment, because this is their way of trying to survive the pressure from the security environment, the Indonesian authorities must remain vigilant to thwart any potential resurgence. So this is why they need to continuously monitor them, even if they're saying that it's done right now. But that might not be necessarily the case. Again, it boils down to the fact that there might be some elements within them that might not agree, that might splinter off, that might diverge from what they're saying.
Okay, I hear the point that you make about the Indonesian authorities staying vigilant, but is it clear if they're also willing to accept JI and its members back into the fold? I would imagine they would want specific conditions met, but do you think that there could be a reintegration plan that may include training and jobs, for example, to bring them back into society?
There's always been an integration plan. I mean, it's part of the radicalization and rehabilitation effort that's been ongoing for years to try and bring them back into society. Whether or not that program has been a success, it still remains to be seen. But again, we're not disputing that the program does exist.
And can I ask you, do you see, you mentioned that JI has lost some of its influence and perhaps lost a bit of its way as well. Could the party, or could the group, if you like, possibly evolve into a proper political party down the road?
They have tried to do that because, as a matter of fact, in 2022, JI did come close to penetrating the electoral arena in 2022. And they were driven by the belief that the parliamentary participation would be a lot less riskier and potentially more effective avenue, to advance their agenda. As opposed to violent actions, because violent actions has to be calibrated, and they're losing popular support because of that. So they don't want the rejection from society for that, which would explain the shift to the more legitimate option. So. Again, like this dissolution might also represent a strategic move to dissolve their militant image and reestablish themselves as legitimate political actors.
Okay, and Munira, what sort of impact could the dissolution of JI could have on other extremist groups here in Southeast Asia, in particular those with historical ties to JI or, that share similar ideologies?
It really depends on each different groups' goals and objectives, because while there might be some overlapping interests, they're not all the same. There's a tendency to try and equalize both JI with IS, but they don't share the same objectives. They don't share the same beliefs necessarily. So we can't really say. I would say that the JI's dissolution might have a minimal impact on other groups because of this divergence. And we know that Saif al-Adal, of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, he's issued a call to arms to all the other militants. But whether or not that they would respond to this call still remains to be seen, because as we know, JI has dissolved their connection with severed their connection with AQ, I think around back in 2010.
All right, Munira, we have to leave it there. We appreciate your time and your insights this morning. That's Munira Mustaffa, Executive Director at the Chasseur Group.